Greetings to Professor Lathanmoy and everyone present here. Wishing you all a very happy World Poetry Day. Thank you very much for inviting me to join your celebration today. I feel so honored. I've been asked to share a few thoughts on poetry and to read my poem. And I'm too happy to do it. I consider it a great privilege. Lots and lots have been said and written on or about poetry, right? I have nothing new to say on the subject, but I'd like to raise a couple of points which we can think of together. Firstly, let's begin by asking the question, what is so special about poetry? How is it different from other forms of writing or composition that are non-poetry? We are aware that a large number of poems are written in verse, whether they are in form verse, that is with meter, rhyme, etc., or free verse. But all writings in verse do not qualify as poetry. Let me give you my favorite example of verse that's not poetry. Maybe some of you too had to read it in school, as I did. 30 days hath September, April, June, and November. February has 28 alone. All the rest have 31. Excepting leap year, that's a time when February days are 29. Good verse with useful information, right? But we can't call it poetry because it doesn't have that quality which we call poetic. On the other hand, there is what is called prose poetry, written in prose form but classed as poetry because of its nature and style of expression. Here's an example I got from the net, written by Amy Lowell, an American poet. The day is fresh washed and fair, and there is a smell of tulips and narcissus in the air. The sunshine pours in at the bathroom window and bores through the water in the bathtub in lanes and planes of greenish white. It cleaves the water into floors like a jewel and cracks it to bright light. This is poetic, isn't it? So, what is a poetic quality? What is the poetriness in a piece of writing? I have no clear-cut answer. Maybe you can think about it. I've sort of tried to describe this elusive poetic quality in my poem called Thank You. It goes like this. Soul of words, tune in a song, gold among gravel, diamond in coal, flame of a candle, life in the living. Without it, life would be sunless sky, wingless bird, colorless world, flowers, sands, fragrance. Loveless marriage, hearth where fire is never lit. So that's the way I've tried to point out what the poetic quality is. For number 2, I'd like to deal with a point that many of us Indian poets seem to be struggling with. This idea of poetry being a spontaneous outflow. William Wordsworth, the great romantic poet from England, made the statement, poetry is a spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. At a glance, the statement seems to voice the idea of giving high value to raw emotion flowing out unchecked. But when we read Wordsworth's own poetry, we can see that they are far from being mere outpourings of feelings. They are beautifully arranged and skillfully crafted verses. So we conclude that he was not advocating a thoughtless, uncontrolled outpouring. We need to remember that poetry is art. One essential nature of poetic art is conciseness. In his book, Literature, Structure, Sound and Sense, Lawrence Perrin writes, "Poetry is the most condensed and concentrated form of literature, saying most in the fewest number of words." I'll just repeat that. Poetry is the most condensed and concentrated form of literature, saying most in the fewest number of words. So, in support of this view, I wrote a short poem titled Prescriptive. It goes like this. Poetry should be lean, rippling with muscle, not flabby, squelchy gutter mud. Poetry should be clean, hard and bright, polished diamond, shaped of sifted words, purged of dross, refined gold. Okay, let these 2 points be enough for our consideration at this time. I'll read one of my poems next. Now, this is about poetry writing itself. In fact, a good number of my poems are about poetry. This poem is from my book, Four Gardens and Other Poems. To make it easier to understand, let me put some clues. As I said before, this poem is about writing poems. The title is called Dredging, which means, as you know, digging up. Creative writing involves digging up a lot of things from different sources, including your own memories. The first 3 lines of the poem talk about writing, waiting for the muse. There may be times when the muse comes to you on her own, but at other times you have to seek her, patiently wait for her. Serious poetry writing is a deliberate action. Most of the images in this poem are taken from childhood memories of landscape from Dharamsala, now in Himachal Pradesh, where we lived for about 2 or 3 years when I was about 9 or 10. From the place, we constantly saw snow-covered mountains. The nearest and most visible were 3 peaks, always white with snow. When I wrote the lines, "Now to go, her eyes on mountains," Psalm 121 from the Bible, "I will lift up my eyes to the hills," was playing at the back of my mind. The 3 peaks became a symbol of the Trinity to me. Then there are lines, "No mushroom to be found, season over, you see." The mushroom I'm talking about here is a wild growth which could be easily picked in its season. But the season is over. If one is to harvest anything, one needs to cultivate it. Rhododendrons bloomed in the summer, but it's winter now, bleak and dreary. The poet must trudge on. The picture of an old man weaving a basket inside the lake is taken from a story about Redil, my mother told me when I was a young child. The idea of someone handing out something, the idea of someone handing one something to write about is borrowed from Anne Lamot's book titled Bird by Bird. So those are the clues I'd like to give about this poem that I'm going to read. So here we go. Dredging. Here am I at midnight, waiting in bleary hope for Muse's visit. Now to go. Eyes on mountains, three-peaked, snow-capped. No mushroom to be found, season over, you see. Rhododendrons faded many months ago. Walk through the woods anyway, among sullen alpine trees, listen to cold winds howl under dark clouds. The surface may be frozen, break the ice, shards of glass. Dive into the lake, go deeper, deeper, till you see, perhaps, old man weaving a basket, or woman in white knitting with golden yarn. May even be chubby little boy bouncing a ball. Don't be afraid. Whoever you meet, whatever they give, bring back and shape it, mountains in mind. Thank you.